Yeah, is Scrum actually working? And then inevitably we get these answers of, well, of course it is. It's like, cool. How do you know? And that's when, or by what standard? I think by what standard is such a great question. And that's when people kind of shrink away and go, I don't want to play this game anymore. Because it is tough, right? Is Scrum working? And then what does that even mean? What do we even mean by that, Todd?
Yeah, what does it mean? It's interesting. Another interesting factor of this is where I think everybody falls back into the easy to measure things to tell whether it's working or not, right? That's where people have latched onto velocity and plan versus actual and all of these things that really are meaningless. So I guess this is a little bit of a meta question. What's the point of Scrum? Throw in a chat. What's the whole point of it? I imagine if you're here, Scrum Masters of the Universe, you've undoubtedly worked around Scrum in the past. What's the point of it?
To have the best daily Scrum ever. What do I win?
You want a free copy of Unlocking Business Agility using evidence-based Scrum?
And it just arrived. That's amazing. How'd you do that?
Awesome.
I love it. Cool. Maybe Todd will sign it for me.
Mitigate risk, achieving. So there's actually some good answers in here.
Yeah.
Deliver more value, faster, happier, right? The in the very definition of Scrum, it's a little bit more generic, where we talk about Scrum as a lightweight framework that helps people, teams, and organizations generate value through adaptive solutions for complex problems. When answering the question, is Scrum working, Ryan, does the Scrum Guide tell you how to do that? How to tell whether it's working or not?
Well, generically, sure, right? Do you hit your sprint goal? But then what does that mean? I would say no. There's no real mechanism other than the sprint goal to tell you whether or not it's working. But even then, hitting your sprint goal, can you hit a sprint goal and not delight your customer?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I would argue at a very crude rudimentary level, maybe, but no, it really doesn't tell you how to know if your Scrum efforts are actually effective.
Yeah, Ryan, we could probably take this even outside the bounds of Scrum. How do you know Agile is working? How do you know your product development effort is on track and being successful, right? So not just to box us into Scrum, we like to talk about evidence-based management as outside the bounds of an Agile framework, right? So this is going to be a lot of us talking about evidence-based management here and how you can leverage evidence-based management in a Scrum environment. But it doesn't just have to be used with Scrum. It can be used with Kanban. It can be used to run a department, like my wife, who's running a data analytics department with some evidence-based management influence in there. So what's the point of Scrum? How do we know if Scrum's working? Right. I think that brings us next to, all right, believably good Scrum. So really, what we're going to do is walk through a little bit of a case study, right? And here's a vision for you to consider. And this is really we're going to base kind of off of Scrum.org. Or off of a Scrum.org type corporation here. This is not specifically or anywhere associated with Scrum.org. I'll just lay that out there. But let's suppose you have the vision to become the global hub for Scrum knowledge, empowering individuals and teams to easily acquire, deepen, and validate their expertise in Scrum. Vision is not in the Scrum Guide. Who thinks having a vision is a really good idea for product management? Not in the Scrum Guide. Not in the Scrum Guide. So what we do have is we have a product goal. And here is a product goal as an example. The global assessment accessibility. That's a big problem that we found, right? That we want to improve global assessment accessibility so that exam takers are more successful in achieving certification as determined by a passing rate increase of 10%. Again, fictitious, not at all associated with Scrum.org. And then, so here's a sprint goal that this team was after. As a non-native English speaker, I am misinterpreting questions. I would like to be able to take the exam in Spanish so that I do not get a question wrong because of a language misinterpretation. Do you think these align? Sprint goal, product goal, vision? Yeah, good. They're supposed to. They were meant to align for this presentation. So this is what we're after as a team, right? We have a vision, we have a product goal that we're working towards. Remember, longer term objective as a Scrum team. This is our current sprint goal. Here's a little bit about the team. We've got a Scrum Master, Chase, well-versed in Agile, respected by the Scrum team and organizational, right? They drive impediment removal, they coach, they train, they do all the things that a Scrum Master should do. We have the developers, right? There's 7 of them. They frequently get to done. They regularly release product increments and achieve sprint goals. They're respectful, hold each other accountable. And we have a product owner here, de facto decision maker, interacts with stakeholders and customers frequently, has full autonomy. Does this sound good? Anybody wish that the accountabilities were fulfilled like this on their Scrum team? Right? So again, we showed vision, product goal, we showed sprint goal. Here's the accountabilities being fulfilled. This is the team. This is our Scrum team. Here's a little bit about their events. All right, sprint planning, not always fun, but they always leave with a sprint backlog, a goal, and a forecast. By the way, if anybody here knows a magic trick to make sprint planning fun, let everyone know. All right. And then after the daily Scrum, this is pretty autonomous developers working here in the daily Scrum. They're using it as intended. It's not a status update, right? They're using it as a planning session. They're talking about the sprint goal. At the end of this sprint, they get into a room with stakeholders and they collaborate, right? They're doing a really great job here. Stakeholders are participating. They're showing up. They're giving feedback. The product backlog is changing. And then in retrospective, it's not just about finding Hogwarts, right? This is about actionable improvement items. That was just a kind of a dig at some of the fancy retrospectives out there, but they're actually improving their process based off of this. So that's a kind of a picture of this team. Is Scrum working for this team? Come on, there's got to be a bunch of Scrum Masters, coaches, and things. Is Scrum working for this team?
Who knows? No idea.
No idea?
Yeah. It depends.
Depends.
What do the Scrum team members say?
So if you remember just from the accountabilities I showed, everybody's working well together. So, and retrospectives are productive, sprint reviews are productive, stakeholders are happy with the interactions they're having with the Scrum team.
I'll say yes, Scrum is working.
What do the customers think of the impact of what's being generated by this team?
I like where you're going with that, Joe. What does how would you know? What in the Scrum Guide tells you this?
Do we need to think about if Scrum values are being followed and also if empiricism is being followed to fullest?
So let's say the Scrum values are implemented. They're doing pretty well. We're doing empiricism to the best of what Scrum has in its framework.
Are you making money?
Where are the Scrum guys that tell you about that?
Sprint review. Clients are happy. Clients are paying. You're making money.
I think, it's a decent answer, right? That should be talked about in the sprint review. Mm-hmm. Does the Scrum Guide explicitly say to talk about that? No.
But it does.
It's a good answer, though. It's a good answer.
But the Scrum Guide does talk about getting working software at the end of each sprint.
So interesting. It says potentially usable increment. The Scrum when in the Scrum Guides does it tell you to put that product into production? It could be working, but it might not be in the customer's hands. Again, as Ryan was saying, good question, good line of thought. But the Scrum Guide is 13 pages now, Ryan, depending on what font you printed in. A little bit more about this team. There's a little bit of trouble in paradise here. So vision, not part of the Scrum Guide again, but what is the strategy to get here? So 2020, we got sprint goal, we got product goal added in to the Scrum Guide. Where does the Scrum Guide mention business strategy or overall product strategy? Doesn't. Here's this product goal that we were talking about. Where in the Scrum Guide does it tell the product owner to check on progress towards the product goal? Where in the Scrum Guide does it tell a product owner how to write a product goal? Longer term objective for the Scrum team. Where in the Scrum Guide does it detail any of this, to check in on it, to share the information on it? How to structure it? Maybe relate it to money, as Anna was saying. Here's a sprint goal. They did ship this sprint goal into production. No one's using it. By the way, looking at people using things is not in the Scrum Guide. Measuring how people are using stuff that you ship into production is not in the Scrum Guide. What do you think, Ryan?
I think we might need something else to help us know whether or not Scrum is working.
Cue the tee up here.
Actually, we tease with the book, but I think EBM itself, and this is Todd, I'm going to give away your punchline here. It's where we're going, right? For us, it's the way to know whether or not we're achieving the goals we set out to. Look, we're using Scrum as it's not a project management framework. We use Scrum to be opportunistic in the marketplace, but to understand those opportunities and to know if we've executed on those opportunities in a responsible way, and to know if we've executed on those opportunities in a way that delighted the customer, we need something other than Scrum. Scrum is the vehicle for delivery, and it helps us be opportunistic by delivering the minimal but sufficient, and it helps us do that in beautiful ways. But to actually know whether or not we hit those greater goals, we need something else. Scrum is necessary in this context, but insufficient, right?
Deliberately inefficient. Like, I want to make sure that Ryan and I are coming across here. We love Scrum. It works really well. One thing we've seen about it is it anti-patterns with it, with this stuff. What to measure? How do we know if Scrum's working or not? Hint, hint. If your velocity is increasing, that is not any indication at all that Scrum is working, right? And just to kind of add to this, we have some measures here, right? There have been a few production bugs, even though the team is focusing on quality. Two of the developers are also working on another project. There are regular issues with that project that pull them away. A team member recently left. The exit interview seemed to go okay. However, the employee did say they were getting bored with the work. The team can ship into production on demand. Because of the bug growth, the Scrum team decides to slow down production to shipments bi-monthly. The team is dependent on a downstream system that regularly fails, and the Scrum Master Chase is doing what he can to manage these dependencies. I have a couple notes here. Measuring bugs, not in the Scrum Guide. Scrum doesn't prohibit developers working on multiple things. The Scrum Guide doesn't tell you when you should ship. You can go multiple sprints and not ship, or you can ship multiple times per sprint. Even though you're dependent on a downstream system, this is still Scrum. And measuring employee satisfaction or something therein, not in the Scrum Guide. answering the question again, is this Scrum team doing well? Commonize it, problem solved. Interesting. So we love Kanban too. Definition of workflow. What's a good definition of workflow? Depends on your context, doesn't it? Could you have a definition of workflow that goes all the way up into pre-production and then not look at anything after that? A lot of teams we see do. Favorite answer, it depends. Yeah, all the time, right? Ryan, you'll like this. I don't know if you remember this is in the deck or not. Holden. It's Brian's son. How do you know?
He still makes that face, by the way. He's now 12 years old. We still get that reply, especially when we say clean your room.
When have we learned how to make that face, Ryan?
I don't know.
So we had someone say that Scrum is an empirical framework built on inspection, adaptation, transparency, right? That's built into the framework in process improvement. And there's some of it from a product management perspective when we talk about the product backlog, when we talk about the sprint review and stakeholder engagement. But it's largely loose on that, right? So how do we add in evidence-based management? So how do you add in evidence-based management to Scrum? Ryan, do you feel like teeing up the elements of EBM?
Yeah, so EBM is another framework that Ken Schwaber initially, actually Chris Schwaber, his wife, brought evidence-based management from the medical field over and kind of presented that and discussed it. And Ken ran with it, and Scrum.org supports it now. And they came up with this framework that's really it's goal driven. So EBM is not a metrics framework. It is a goal-based framework. 3 levels of goals: strategic, intermediate, and immediate tactical. And those have different ranges. Those have different kind of scopes. The evidence area is really tied to key value areas. You have unrealized value, current value, time to market, and ability to innovate. And I think one of the more important yet mostly overlooked aspects of EBM is the empirical nature of it. We're still using inspection and adaptation constantly. And it's not just updating the data, it's also assessing whether or not we're still measuring the right thing at the right time for the right customer or for the right business objective or for the right goal. So not only are we continually inspecting and adapting the data coming in, but even the way that we're measuring things all throughout. And even directionally, whether or not we're moving in the right direction to achieve our goals, or whether or not the goals are still actually relevant, right? So instead of the normal annual planning or the OKR session or you know the whatever framework you're using, instead of throwing that stuff on a PowerPoint and shelving it for a year, we're continually working and updating and inspecting using the EBM framework. It's continuous alongside the cadence of a Scrum team. Now, at a super high level, a strategic goal, we expect this to take a while. Typically, you could say, and I hate giving timelines to these, right? Because then people hold you to it and, oh, Ryan said it was a year, but it's a big thing. It's a big thing we're trying to achieve. It's a strategic direction and initiative. It could be, and it can take numerous months to achieve. That intermediate goal, achievement of this intermediate goal is a clear step towards that strategic goal. It tells us that strategic goal is still valid and worthy. Maybe this is more of like a 6-monther. You know, we kind of, you know, we'll say 3 to 6, but that's guidance. Please don't go out and I worry that I'm going to be the next Mike Cohn where I use the word ceremony once and then it like takes off forever. And now the Scrum events are ceremonies forever. We're just giving a little bit of guidance there. Immediate tactical, if you want to think of an immediate tactical goal as a sprint goal, I wouldn't be mad at you. Right? I think it's that more near term near-term objective, that we're trying to do some work that validates our intermediate goal, that helps us validate that strategic goal, right? We're trying to maintain alignment here and use these smaller goals to validate the bigger strategic direction. I don't know, anything to add there, Todd?
No. Just to kind of further where you're going, Ryan, I mapped in where our case study is at with these. And so Ryan was associating, we feel it's okay to associate sprint goal with immediate tactical goals and product goal with intermediate goals. You don't have to do it that way. We're doing this for example. As in everything, do what's in your given context. In our case study, there wasn't a strategy. We just had a vision, right? We just had a vision. And so the strategy then here is expand the use and knowledge of Scrum by appealing to a global audience, right? Perhaps this company was focused just on a North American audience, and now they want to expand to a global audience. That's just strategy behind where they're going. And, Ryan, as you were mentioning too, how does empiricism work on this? Right? Empiricism happens to the inspection, adaptation, and making things transparent as it relates to the progress you're making in your goals, right? So we have that strategy here to appeal towards a global audience. We have a product goal right here that is global assessment accessibility, right? To see if that's helping us towards our strategy. And if you remember, our immediate technical goal will say our sprint goal was to give it in Spanish, right? You could see there is not a linear path here. We gave it in Spanish, and right now measurements are telling us that that really didn't do so much. It really didn't do so much. All right.
It's interesting.
A safe debate in the chat.
It's interesting, this diagram. A lot of people will move past this. These smaller circles are a number of immediate tactical goals. And as you can see, it's kind of slithering along like a snake. We're kind of shifting and changing as, those turns are the result of customer feedback, right? So that's the feedback loop working well. But you'll also see the strategic goal is shifting a bit, and I remember vividly going to a Midwest company, Midwest medical device company, and they had set 9 OKRs for the year. And they were like, come hell or high water, these 9 are going to be achieved. And I asked a very basic question as, being a consultant there trying to help them out, how many OKRs do you typically achieve in a year? Well, we might get 3. So why did you set 9? And the CEO was in the room and he goes, can you come back in like 30 minutes? And we came back and they had 4 OKRs selected. And I said, cool. So now what's the mechanism you're going to use to make sure that the juice is always worth the squeeze? And they kind of looked at me funny. And I'm like, well, you have 4 OKRs and we're in January. And you look out the window and it's snowing and it's cold outside. And I'm like, it's going to be nice outside in 6 months. And we're going to be like talking about summer vacations. Are these goals still going to be relevant? And they're like, well, we don't know. I'm like, so how could you know? And that led to further discussion about the empirical nature. And eventually we got them off of the OKR train and more towards an evidence-based management setup. But that just the basic question, will the juice be worth the squeeze in 6 months? We don't know. Well, how could you know? Oh, we could inspect and adapt that. Cool. So you need a framework with empiricism that's tied to your goals. Cool. Let's talk about EBM then.
Yeah. Yeah, and Ryan and I really like to open up with the goals conversation, because what we're about to get into next is what everybody gravitates to, the key value areas and measuring things. You could be measuring all the right things, but without goals, what is it really the right thing? So that's why we start with this goals conversation. Everybody just gets drawn straight into the KVAs, which the key value areas, AKA buckets of things that we will measure underneath, right? In evidence-based management, there's 4 different key value areas. Again, you would measure something, at least one thing underneath each area. The 4 KVAs, for those of you that are unaware: unrealized value. This is unfulfilled potential. These are potential needs that you are not currently giving your customers right now. A satisfaction gap. It could be things that you would need to build for a new customer. It could be a new service offering, a new product. But this is stuff that you are not currently giving your customers today. Current value is what are we currently delivering today? What are things that our customers have right now, and are they using them? I'll give a couple examples of our case study, what we might look at there. Time to market. I prefer to talk about this as time to learn. How quickly can we learn from something? How frequently are we releasing? Perhaps even you could put some flow-based stuff in here if you wanted, if you limit WIP, right? But how quickly are we able to learn, and how quickly are we able to deliver new value? And ability to innovate, effectiveness. I've said multiple times, and I was really waiting for reaction in the PST community. I'll answer that question in just a second, Nicole. I was really waiting for a big reaction in the PST community when I said Scrum is largely targeting ability to innovate with mentions of here. But Scrum largely is about the effectiveness of your team, right? You see the word effective a lot. Yes, there's empirical process control built in for your product and your process, but largely Scrum targets this and doesn't tell us how to do these things. Evidence-based management can help you with that. Nicole says UV is a product backlog. So it's interesting because you may have things that are enhancing current items that you're sending, or like it might be like a feature enhancement or something like that to your current target base. You may also have things in your product backlog that deal with effectiveness or time to market. A lot of the stuff on your product backlog I'd prefer is unrealized value that's targeted there. But the reality of the work that we live in and the world that we work in is that there's going to be things that may target each one of these key value areas. Right. And you asked for the measurement. I have a measurement in our case study here. Global audience market share when it comes to Scrum. What's our market share versus, let's pretend our competitors are Scrum.org, Scrum Alliance, SAFe. What's our market share when it comes to that, right? What's our market share? And we want to be able to build market share from there. By asking that question and saying we're going to measure market share, our idea is to get new market share, to get more market share. A couple of things that we might measure under current value. Are our employees satisfied? People have debated in the past that could be ability to innovate. We don't really care, just measure it, right? There is a correlation, as we all know, between customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction, so I put it here for now. Current value, multilingual feature usage, right? That relates to our product goal on this team. And then we also want to know non-native English pass rate, right? Non-native English speaking pass rate. Time to market, I put release frequency here. How often are we shipping into production? I also put work in progress here, right? We love the flow metrics, work in progress. As we know, by limiting work in progress, in a lot of instances, you increase throughput. So I put that in time to market. For anybody here is a big flow person. You could map the flow metrics pretty nicely into these bottom two. Ability to innovate, you put on product index. That is because we have those two developers that are working on different things. How much are they working on different things, right? Context switching. I also put production bug count because the number of bugs that we have make us less effective. We're having a lot of production bugs come in, that's distracting work, right? So these are just some examples of what you might be able to measure in the little case that we're painting for you today. Ryan, anything else to add here?
No, I think you did great there. It's yeah, these are good examples.
Yeah. Ron, that's a good point too. Those are things that we oftentimes measure there, but you could put something in there from idea to validating in production, the cycle time there. But from the time you put something on the product backlog until it's in production, if you were to look at something that has more of an angle like that to it.
Well, and I think too, Ram, to extend on Todd's answer a little bit there, we look at this holistically, not just one KVA or one measure. And so while you're correct that release frequency and WIP wouldn't speak to the efficacy of learning, the feature usage and the pass rate that we're looking at above in current value would. And so that's that's the other difficult part about this is we have this holistic picture, right? And I think this is another unique thing about EBM is that We're looking at the market factors and the operational factors holistically. We're not separating the two. And so when we go into a sprint review with a well thought out EBM dashboard, we're not just talking about, well, the team got this many story points done and here's the current increment. And does anyone have any questions? It's here's the current feature usage, here's employee satisfaction, here's customer satisfaction, here's our current profit, here's some items that we could decide to work on in the future, here's the market share increase or decrease, here's the new pass rate, our bug count has decreased, our on product index is improving, and now you're having this holistic conversation as opposed to one or two cherry picked aspects that may or may not, to Ram's point, tell you anything about the efficacy of learning or of whatever else it is we're trying to measure. So I think you've teased out a good point there, Ram.
On product index, so that would be how often are we spending time working on this particular thing that it's basically context switching, Jamie. On product, how much time we have those two developers that are working on other things, if you recall in the case study. Cool. We have just a statement slide here. The key to knowing if Scrum is working lays in adopting an empirical mindset. Evidence-based management offers the structures, goals, and measurable evidence that help teams continuously assess and adapt. By leveraging EBM, teams can ensure that their Scrum practice delivers real measurable value. Because we all kind of proved out there, right? Scrum seemed like it was working really well for that team. We were following it by the 13-page guide, which is deliberately incomplete, right? But how do you know? Can't tell you how many times I've been asked that. How do you know whether this is working or not? Or like you say, it feels like the customer's happy, right? It feels like we're heading in the right direction. How do you know? And is there alignment on that? What we have lastly here is what we call an evidence-based management dashboard. This is just an example. There's flaws in it. The one big thing I think, and I believe Anna had mentioned it, there's not the mention of money on here, right? We want to talk money. How much money did we spend? How much does it cost for a sprint? What's our return on investment? Those sorts of conversations. So I would say if there was one big thing that I would say is missing on this dashboard, it would be money, because money paints reality. But you can kind of see this would be something that you could bring into a sprint review, that a product owner could sit down and have conversations with stakeholders about what's actually happening here. Here's our strategic goal, our intermediate goal, our immediate tactical goal. You can see we're growing global audience market share. So different things like here. Anything else you want to mention about this dashboard?
No, I think
or dashboards in general.
You're pointing out something wonderful here in that during a sprint review, what if someone pointed out, this is all great, but what did it cost us? Awesome. And so right after that sprint review, we need to go back. We need to update our board here. We need to track down the cost. We need to figure out whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze, right? We spent $1 million and we made $3 million. Great. Or we spent $1 million and made $0. That's not good. And so it's just a continual adaptation based off of the stakeholder needs, what we're learning about our product. And so this is why that empirical nature, that empirical aspect is so important, because this is just one moment in time, and the next moment's going to come and different data is going to be needed. And so that's why I think EBM has such an advantage over, that's why we think EBM has such an advantage over OKRs and the other types of frameworks, in that empiricism is baked into it. This will not be the right dashboard 6 months from now. We know that up front. And so we continually inspect and adapt, not just the metrics, but the goals, the direction, all of those great things. And so I think that's that it's a good thing to tease out, that, yeah, let's add cost to the next one. Let's see what insights that drives. And maybe that helps change a future direction or decision.
For new product teams, which key value area would you suggest to start off with? What measures typically you've seen new teams use? This was a really interesting observation from Patricia Kong's behalf on me, because her and I have been talking about EBM for many, many, many years now. And she says, now, if it's a new product team, I I will absolutely start with the goals conversation and talk about unrealized value, right? If I'm walking into a team that is existing and I'm doing consulting, or I'm a scrum master or even a product owner, for some reason, I have a tendency to start getting some measurements around ability to innovate, and then I move around and then get to goals. There's not really like a here's where you should start. If it is a brand new team building a new product, I would absolutely make sure that you have a strategy, that you have a longer term objective, an intermediate goal, and then go to immediate tactical goal and define what unrealized value you're trying to get, right? If it's something in production, you can start with CV. I think I go to A2I because I'm a coder. I'm a software engineer by heart. So that's just like an easy place for me, but I quickly move to other areas. This also brings up a good point. It's not all or nothing. You don't need to start with everything right away, right? You should really be measuring, as Ryan mentioned, something in each KVA because you need a holistic picture. For brand new teams building something new, I would really want to know what unrealized value, what satisfaction gap are we trying to fill, and how are we going to measure that?
Yep, totally agree. And if you're looking for ideas in ability to innovate, especially, just ask your team what's difficult about delivery today, and then start measuring a factor of that and see if you can improve it. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to go about this, but I tend to align with Todd on this too. Unrealized value, figuring out the satisfaction gap that you're solving for, and trying to shrink. Because if you don't know that, then why are you building anything? Right? It's a good place to start.
So what Samantha says here. Business finance teams always want to define ROI as currency value. There are things that can be measured as currency and others cannot. ROI is not always equal to money. Yeah, one in clap, happiness of people doing the work. Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely true. I think it's really important to have budgetary information on here in some regards, whether cost per sprint, how much money we've spent through in the budget, or have a conversation around there. Generally with like strategic goals, there is some kind of ROI associated with that, right? There should be in most instances, right?
Well, and it's a great point, Samantha. I mean, I've worked in regulated environments where if the work wasn't completed, manufacturing was halted. Right. So there's no doubt. I mean, business ceases to function. Right. That's bigger than ROI. I mean, that ends ROI. So, or the government initiates an inspection. Right. There's all sorts of risk and regulatory things. And so, yeah, I think it's important to understand not everything's going to equal dollars. But to Todd's point, we do have to satisfy some of those fiduciary accountabilities. And I think great product owners strive to do that.
I think lastly, just kind of getting back here, we do have some getting started tips on here. Remember this empiricism, right? Goals. Without goals, you could just be measuring into nothing, right? So we always like to remind people of that because people tend to be utterly attracted by the KVAs. You can tell evidence-based management is getting quite popular at this moment because you're seeing a lot of posts talking about the KVAs, but nobody's talking about the goals, right? So that's where you'll see us show up in the comments a little bit and be like, don't forget about the goals, please. It's really important because that's where empiricism kicks in this, right? Measurements help you inspect, but you're generally adapting based off of where you are in regards to these three different levels of goals. Some of our getting started tips, measurements. It is okay to start there. What are you measuring now? Does it fit into the KVAs? Do you have any gaps? Perhaps you don't know what UV you're measuring. We're always surprised to see how many teams we run into that don't measure what they put into production and whether people are using it or not. It's wild, especially with all the telemetry tools that just come associated with all the stuff that we were using right now. We're really surprised that a lot of people aren't measuring anything in current value. So we think it's perfectly okay to start here. This is a good conversation initiator by itself. The goals conversation can be a little bit more difficult. That doesn't mean stop, right? Remember, without those goals, you can't get the benefits of this. And then with the goals, favorite outcome-oriented goals over outputs. Do you know what your current goals are? What's the strategy for what you're building? That question is always like, what's the strategy behind why you're building what you're building? Do you know what your current goals are for your product? And then favorite outcome-oriented over outputs. Big caution, big warning. EBM has gotten me yelled at. Too much too soon, right? Be careful with this information. The narrative around a product in your office environment can be different than reality. Evidence-based management tends to bring some hard truths with it. For instance, I asked a company, what's the strategy behind what you're building this for? You have 4 teams working on this. It costs multiple millions of dollars a year. What's the strategy behind this? Nobody could answer it. And when we found the original business case for what the original strategy was supposed to be, they had deviated far from that and had been nowhere close to where they were supposed to be going. That got me a call into a VP's office at 4:30 on a Friday, which if you know a VP at 4:30 on the Friday, it's generally not a fun conversation. So narrative versus reality is a very real thing. There's office narratives, there's product narratives, and it could be different than what the reality is. Evidence-based management, we're looking for the reality. That's where we want to be. We want to live in the reality. Just be careful with it. We don't want anybody contacting us saying they got yelled at on LinkedIn. I've learned my lessons quite a bit with evidence-based management over the years. And hopefully you won't repeat those mistakes again, but I'm a mistake maker. Anything else to add there, Ryan?
No, I think that's the bulk of it. I would just reiterate, as you gather information, include those that could be hurt, damaged, or embarrassed the most, and ensure that they are aware before anyone else sees it. Otherwise, your EBM efforts may be stomped out of existence before they ever get a chance to flourish.
So it looks like we do have a question in the chat from Ram about strategy and innovation.
Our definitions for those 2 terms. So
oh my gosh, that's like asking the definition of a business analyst in an organization.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to be careful with this. I think strategy, I would just look at directionally, where are we and where do we want to end up? I think from a strategy standpoint, I think that's as deep as I'll go, because look, the word strategy is heavily overloaded and it can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different contexts and organizations. But I think the commonality amongst all of those contexts and organizations would be, where are we and where do we want to end up? And then innovation, I think, is really, innovation to me is the disciplined application of empiricism. We are looking for new and better ways. We are adjusting and adapting as we go. And that to me is innovation, right? Otherwise you have stagnation. I don't know, is that fair, Todd? Would you go along with that?
Yeah.
I know there are OKRs and KPIs and one measures value from them, but what is the difference between the widely used terms like OKRs, KPIs, and KVMs?
Yeah, so bringing it back up, I would talk more broadly about the key value areas when you're asking this question, right? Like a key value measurement is just something that you're measuring that is going to give some kind of indicator into one of those key value areas, right? KPIs tend to be kind of, I've never seen containers like the 4 KVAs that we have in evidence-based management when it surrounds that. OKRs, from my experience, are generally very output driven. So you're measuring them with output type of stuff, right? Which tends to not really be indicative of anything than speed or something familiar or something along those lines. So I would say that when it comes to OKRs and KPIs, you could take your KPIs and see if they do map into any key value area. But oftentimes they'll probably be on the lower end. They'll probably be down here. Key performance indicators will probably be somewhere down here. If you're lucky, you might be able to find something that's associated here in a lot of organizations. Now, I say this is from my experiences. We all have, we have 71 different experiences on this Zoom call. So I'm just talking about most of my experiences. The key performance indicator is generally somewhere around, are we being effective, and do we have some kind of time to market associated with it?
So I think to add to that, just the holistic nature, which is I think what Todd is really pointing out, that would be a key difference, right? Just this, I don't know of any other framework, whether it's OKRs, KPIs, whatever it is you're using, that takes a holistic viewpoint like EBM does. And look, you can be successful with OKRs and KPIs, right? And I think you could apply some empiricism and some EBM ideas and make that all kind of, you could probably Frankenstein that thing up together and make it work, or you could just use a framework that already exists like EBM to do the things that you want to do empirically. But yeah, I think the holistic nature is the key differentiator there. I mean, and at this point, I mean, we've got about 7 to 10 minutes, whatever it is. I mean, any questions are welcome. I know a lot of different things are happening in the Agile world. I know there's a lot of questions about EBM. If you do have any questions, we're more than happy to field them with the time remaining.
Yeah, and you put it out there. No, nobody's going to bring it up, are they?
Well, and I think Samantha's right. Google's done just fine with OKRs and KPIs. They're also probably one of the few companies using them as intended.
Yeah.
And it's Google. It is Google, right? So,
it is Google.
It's just like how everybody tried to replicate the Spotify model for a while, but it's Spotify, right?
What are your thoughts on, I'll throw it out there just because it's been all over, the whole is Agile dead thing. Where is this coming from, and what are your thoughts on it? Because I'm seeing organizations, when they're making they're doing corporate reorganizations, their Agile teams are the first teams hit, especially Scrum Masters. There's a lot of Scrum Masters in the market looking for work right now.
Agile existed prior to it being codified in the manifesto. It'll exist long after whatever it is that we're doing to it now ends and turns into the next thing. Agility is really, I think, empirical process control at its root. And so I think that'll be popular no matter what flavor it tends to be. I think I have strong opinions here, and so some people may not like some of this, but I don't think LinkedIn is a real place. I think LinkedIn is largely influencers trying to get clicks, and I think Agile is dead is a popular clickbait term right now, and so I think that's getting a lot of traction. I don't think Agile is dead. I posted yesterday. I don't think Agile is dead. I think the easy money is gone. And so the people that thought that they could become a Scrum Master with a 2-day class and make $150,000 a year, that's gone. And I think some of the Agile is dead posts are people lamenting that. But I think those who are dedicated practitioners, those who are lifelong learners, those who have made this their life's work, I think they'll do just fine. There's always economic downturns, and there's always, the economy is cyclical, and elections happen, and all sorts of factors come into play, and sometimes we're a little uncomfortable. But those who are serious and practitioners and embrace professionalism, I think will do just fine. So is Agile dead? No. The easy money is dead. And now I think companies are expecting us to prove that what we're doing is valuable, which is why Todd and I are treating, EBMs are North Star. Like, we look at this framework as a means to demonstrate the efficacy and value of the work we provide to organizations. And I think that's going to be table stakes coming up, right? You're going to have to prove that what you're doing is working, or else they're going to kick you out and find someone else who will.
Ben says, where's the easy money now? Ben, when you find out, let us know.
Let us know.
Yeah.
It's
So
in
have you
AI.
tried to marry EBM with other products, technical management, work like Marty Kagan? Melissa, so there's a lot of really great product management stuff coming from those folks, right? They are very complementary each other. I'll just say that EBM, I think, fits with a lot of their ideas quite well. They can actually help to share in, from my perspective anyway, how to structure good goals, how to write good goals, how to think of the customer, a lot of stuff around current value and unrealized value. I think that they really fill gaps there. I highly encourage you to read up on their stuff. And I do feel like they're geared towards that sector of thing where there's a lot of questions unanswered, where product owners can go. And that's where a product owner should be focused on how the strategy is, how the intermediate goal is structured, and what's happening, what unrealized value am I chasing, and what's happening with current value, right? So I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of synergy there. I have a friend who's really big into design thinking, and when I speak with him about evidence-based management, he's like, yes, he's like, that's exactly it. That's just something I can put what I talk about every day into, right? Scrum coin, crypto,
crypto and AI. That's the easy money right now.
Yeah, crypto.
I think the other thing is specifically about the Scrum Masters. I think the game is changing, and there was a post I put up early last year that exploded and really upset people. But I think you're going to see the Scrum Master basically be a manager or tech lead of a team. I'm not sure that's a bad thing, right? I've really worked through that idea quite a bit. I've written quite a bit about it. If you're interested, shoot me an email, ryan@agileforhumans.com, and I'll give you some links. But I really think the authority that director level, manager level has will really help Scrum Masters be more effective. And I also think that the expectations on that particular, look, it's an accountability. And so having people fulfill that accountability could be interesting, that are in that more management leadership position. And so if I'm a Scrum Master not in that position, I would be looking for those positions ASAP. Can I get into management or leadership roles? And if not, how do I educate myself to get there? I think that's going to be how those roles survive long term. The pure play Scrum Master, I think, is going to struggle in the market going forward. But at the same time, I think EBM can be helpful too. Like, if I'm an employee, and Todd and I have some materials coming out this year about managing your career with evidence-based management. If I'm an employee that can continuously demonstrate the value I bring, that's interesting. And if I'm a Scrum Master that has a dashboard that has continuous one-on-ones with leadership and says, here's what we're doing and here's how it's helping, that's interesting too. And so I think it's going to even come down to the employee level of demonstrating your value continuously to ensure that, you know, you have the opportunity to remain in that organization, but also to grow, to get promoted, and to do other interesting things. Surprised no one wants a hot take on PMI and Agile Alliance. We'll leave that for another meetup, I guess.
Do it, Ryan.
And with that said, we're looking at 2 p.m.
Hey, we're out of here. All right.
Just gonna drop that one and leave, huh?
No, I have no hot take on it. I can't remember the last time either organization was relevant to anything I did. I'm not bothered, and I have zero cares.
Fair answer.
And I'm always optimistic for good, and I won't be disappointed or surprised by bad. So basically, you still have to go to work tomorrow, and the sun's still going to come up, and we still have to deliver value, and we still have to demonstrate we delivered value. Nothing changed. But in any case, Todd's right. We hit the time box. Jamie, and the rest of the Scrum
Yep.
Masters of the Universe team, thanks for having us. Ange, it's great to see you as well.
Great to
love
have you
being
guys.
here. We love doing this. We hope we get to join you again soon.
Yep.
And we hope
would love
everybody
that.
keeps the conversation going.
Thanks, Ryan and Todd. We really appreciate you being here and sharing your time and knowledge with us, and all of you for being here. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks
everybody.
for coming.
Bye, everyone.
Later.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Ange, I think you have